3.
Yummy like a gummy bear.
It's the internet. You're busy. Let's do this for April 11th, 2024. For the next hour or so, let me help you sort through the world of gaming on Game Mess Mornings Live with me, Jeff Grubb. Today, you say EA explored Dead Space 2. I say EA considered Dead Space 2, but EA will just call the whole thing off. But first, please join me in welcoming today's co-host at Game Mess Mornings. It's Alex Orona, everybody. Alex, how are you doing?
Doing great. I'm feeling good. We got a rainy Chicago morning, but otherwise it's good. I got my coffee.
Yeah, it's a little bit gloomy here as well, but I kind of like it. I got True Green out in my yard right now, trying to make my grass look a green, which is just fun homeowner stuff. It's things I never thought about before. I'm like, oh, all my neighbors' grasses looks really nice. I can't be the one asshole standing out, so I do that now. But yeah, I tell you what, it's been a week already. Hey. We're at Thursday. Yeah. We got Friday tomorrow. This weekend, I'm going to try to do absolutely nothing, Alex. I'm looking
you're just busy breaking the news, man. You're breaking the internet.
Breaking it is one way of putting it, for sure, yes. We'll get
arguing with AAA developers. How about that?
Yeah. I mean, I'll start there. Like, it did cause me a hard time, and my, the initial instinct is, how dare they? And then I'm like, oh, I caused them a hard time. Every day, all the time. How dare I even think that for a second? So whatever. I got a little bit hassled for half a day.
There was a fire.
Yeah, big deal. Big whoop.
There was a media fire for them. They're like, oh crap.
Exactly. Okay. Right. Yeah. And it's like these are people who this is their entire job, and there's teams, and it affects people, and I understand that. And again, that's never what I'm trying to do. That's never the purpose of any of the reporting. It is an unfortunate byproduct of it. But as always, I serve the audience. I write for the audience. I report for the audience. I don't work for these developers and these publishers, so I kind of can't take that too far into account. But doesn't mean I don't feel bad. I do all the time. And then I got a taste of my own medicine yesterday. That's how I'm feeling right now. So, oh well.
All of a sudden, you had to put out. Where's your PR team?
They're at school right now.
Let's say that, or it's Mike Minotti.
Yeah, well, yeah, listen, no way, absolutely not. I would not trust that guy to do my PR for me. Actually, he would be very nice about it.
Guys, everyone just calm down.
Yeah, Alex, how have you been? You've been on the show before. You were on the GB at Night couch for Summer Game Fest, right?
Yes, I was.
That was great. Hey, we're doing it again. You want to come be on the couch again? Because I'm starting to put that together.
I would love to. Let's figure something out.
Okay, let me know if you're going to be in town. We'll see if we can make it happen. That would be fantastic. But at the very least, it was great to see you there. Great to see you again. How are you feeling about video games in 2024 right now?
It feels like a lot of people are talking about that there's kind of a lull right now. Oh, there's not a whole lot to look forward to. But me and my crew of people, we focus more on the indies, and we're finding a lot of. Yeah. And we're finding a lot of the weird ones right now that are just kind of, coming out of nowhere. All of a sudden, it's like, wait, where did Buckshot Roulette, right?
Yeah.
Like the game where you're playing, what's it called, Russian roulette, and it's real creepy.
Right.
It all of a sudden it's like, where did this come from? And it's kind of genius, right? Obviously, Balatro, right? It's just that's where I'm kind of right now. I'm like, juggling a lot of that, so they're hitting kind of hard for me. I think we have at least 4 more games coming out this year, this month, that I'm pretty hyped on. That I'm like, wow, this is going to be a lot.
Yeah, I definitely am in the of two minds about it. Where the big games feel like you can't ignore them. At least to doing this job, I'm like, oh, I can't ignore these. I got to do my best to be able to talk about them on the Bombcast. But my normal where I default to is kind of what you're on, where I'm like, I want to be finding out what's going on with all these interesting indie games. And so just because these big games are starting to wind down a little bit, I'm now looking at the schedule and picking out 3 or 4 or 5 games a month on the schedule, let alone the ones that are going to come out of nowhere. That I'm like, that looks interesting. I want to spend some time with that. And then we'll get into it, the AAA initiative. There's games that are finally going 1.0. Then I'm like, oh, it's time to go back to that. So there's a lot happening. While the industry continues to be kind of on fire in a lot of ways, and of course, a lot of people's jobs are in very precarious positions, or they already lost their jobs and are having trouble finding new ones. I'm going to keep playing games, and hopefully things can get better for everybody. But yeah, this year it's been rough one way or the other, and yeah,
that's why it is like, okay, it's nice that you get like a 1 to 2 man team that puts out something that's like completely wholly out of left field. You're like, oh, that wasn't even on anyone's radar, and all of a sudden, like, it came off of itch.io.
Yep.
So it's like, oh yeah, that's where for me, I'm like, oh yeah, the industry is really like kind of on fire. But when 1 or 2 guys can kind of come out, give you a little something, and all of a sudden,
yeah,
and because it ended up spreading like wildfire, right? Twitter.
Yep, exactly. All right, let's explain what we do here. Most weekdays, I, Jeff Grubb, will help piece your gaming life back together. That includes breaking news and maybe even some of our own original reporting. For all these topics, I'll get the input of a bona fide expert who will make me look smart. If you were watching live on Twitch, welcome. You can always listen to the show later on podcast feeds by searching for Game Mess Mornings or find the RSS on giantbomb.com. You can also catch the show later with chapters and timestamps on YouTube. Hello, YouTube. All right, we have a lot to get into. So let's start the morning mess with EA Motive was reportedly hoping to make a brand new Dead Space game. This is from Tom Ivan at VGC. A second report has claimed that the Dead Space franchise is on hold after sales of the most recent game failed to meet EA's expectations. After its Dead Space remake released last January to critical acclaim, EA Studio Motive spent a few months exploring ideas for a new series entry, according to Bloomberg sources. It's claimed the studio was particularly keen to make a brand new game rather than a remake of Dead Space 2, although both ideas had been on the table. However, the project was never given the green light and was reportedly shelved as early as last spring, following disappointing sales of the remake. This corroborates claims made earlier this week by Giant Bomb, which said the plans for a Dead Space 2 remake were put on ice after the first game failed to deliver commercially. EA responded to the publication's report with a denial. "We don't normally comment on rumors, but there is no validity to this story," a spokesperson told IGN. The publisher announced this week that Motive is joining the company's wider Battlefield development team. So yeah, Alex, let's just recap it real quick. This is yesterday on the show, I was trying to like tell a clear story of this is a team that is now working on 2 games, and those two games are not Dead Space 2. It's working on the Iron Man game, and now they're working on Battlefield alongside a bunch of other developers. So what was happening with Dead Space 2 was something they once considered. They're no longer considering it. They're not working on it, and they're now working on these 2 games instead. That was the story. And there's like always more details and nuance in there than that. But that's the main story. That's what's important to people. That's what they're going to take away. And so that's what I focused on. Like, hey, that's the basic general timeline. The specifics of the timeline don't matter so much to the people listening to the show. And anytime I start getting into specifics like that, Alex, I start worrying about like burning sources and stuff like that. Why get specific when vague sort of gestures to like the structure of the story will do? And then
you don't need the full details on it. You know, you have like the big picture, and the big picture, the takeaway is that Dead Space 2 remake isn't happening.
Exactly. Right. And that's what most people care about. And if you care about why, that detail was in there as well. There's a couple things there. Obviously, if the game would have sold insane, they probably would have made another one. It didn't. And then also the team was like looking to try some different stuff. Now, I also like think about when I'm telling these stories, when I'm like coming on here and sharing this information, I'm like thinking in my head, like, oh, I've talked about this a bunch of times. I remember we would talk about Dead Space. I think we leaked Dead Space on this show before it was announced and stuff. And at that time, it's like, hey, they are doing Dead Space as a remake, but they're going to start bringing in other things from Dead Space 2. And the idea from the beginning was to quickly like probably make something that's called Dead Space 2, but it's mostly a new game and it diverts right away. And so in my head, when I'm saying Dead Space 2 or even Dead Space 2 remake, it's like with that in mind, that this could be something new and different. And there's like other details, like, yeah, when they were primarily considering this was in the months leading up to the release of Dead Space 1. And then they were looking at the numbers then, and they kind of knew what was going on.
And so, we had, again, we've seen this with the RE remakes, right? And I think that they kind of wanted that big hit.
Yes.
But at the same time, like, Dead Space was never that as big as Resident Evil. It was always the B version of it.
And I think another thing there is that people feel good about investing their time and their money and their energy and their fandom into Resident Evil because they know Capcom's going to stick with that. I think people were kind of like, okay, this Dead Space thing, but Resident Evil 4 just came out. I'm definitely going to go play that. I'll come back to this Dead Space thing once I know EA is serious about it, and clearly they weren't. That was not what they were doing here.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of the series, and it's kind of unfortunate to me because I really liked what they did with the Dead Space remake, especially including some like, the zero G stuff from from part 2. I think they could have gone even further with it. And I think that, yeah, you can branch off and do something wholly almost like different with it, with the story. The story even just ended in such a weird way anyways. I mean, in the series, the third game, its DLC had the ending, and the ending was a cliffhanger anyways.
Yep. Right. So exactly. Yeah. And that was the reason why from the beginning of this one, they're like, we're going to do the Dead Space 1 remake, but we're going to do it in the back of our head while we're doing that. We are imagining a world where future Dead Space games will take a new path and kind of establish a new timeline. And so, yeah, that was always something they were thinking about from the beginning. And of course they were. Of course they were always thinking about the possibility of a sequel. Now, does that mean I think Motive was going to be a team that was going to be making remake after remake or sticking on Dead Space forever? Probably not, especially in a world where it's like the game didn't sell the gangbusters that it needed to justify that. But there's definitely something they consited. It was on the table, and well, considered, that's the wrong word.
I mean, right? Like how much?
Excuse me.
How much? I mean, it's on the table like everything's on the table, right?
Exactly. Yes, and and now it's not. And if you were hoping for Dead Space 2, it's not coming. That's the story.
I mean, again, there's these like a lot of like really for me what feels like uncomfortable expectations. Why are you expecting such a massive hit like Resident Evil when Dead Space proper wasn't a massive hit?
It probably is tiers, right, Alex, where it's like the tier of sales that it didn't get to probably is the one where it's like, well, we can't not make a sequel. If it sells this good, we have to make one. It probably did well enough to justify the project that it was, and to make to be like, oh, this was a good use of Motive's time and resources. I bet that is true for Dead Space remake. In terms of like we can't not make a sequel though. That's the tier it didn't get to. So yes, I heard lackluster sales. That's what was told to me. No one has denied that part, or they say there's no validity to the story. Again, what part are they referring to? But no one's really denied that part of it. So maybe it is a little bit worse than that framing, but I bet if we were to go look at those numbers, Alex, like you and I, like, hey, they put us in charge of running a video game company, and we're like, okay, we're going to spend this much money to make this much money, and that's like what Dead Space 1 did, Dead Space 1 remake did. I bet we'd be like, yeah, that's a lot more money than you spent on it. That's great. So, right, uncomfortable expectations.
We would be fine with it. We'd say, yeah, you know what? Sequel, right?
Sequel, yeah, exactly. All right, speaking of EA is raising the price of EA Play subscriptions. This is from James Batchelor at gamesindustry.biz. Electronic Arts is increasing the price for its EA Play subscription service. Gamesindustry.biz understands. The standard EA Play tier will increase from $5 or £4 a month to $6 and £6 per month, with the annual fee rising from $30 from $30 to $40 and from £20 to £36. Man, that's wild. Yeah, I mean, hey, who doesn't have EA Play? Everyone is subscribed to this. You're just going to pay, right? Because you're already paying for it. Okay.
We're in a weird space right now where the subscription conversation is starting to happen amongst people. And what I find interesting is that it's so silent about it. Like all of a sudden I just talked to some of my co-hosts, and I was like, hey, are you guys still paying for like PS Plus and Xbox? And they're like, well, not right now.
Yeah.
Like, okay, everyone just kind of canceled.
I think we just had it was either on Bombcast or one of these shows where we just had that conversation of, hey, who's subscribed to PS Plus right now? And I'm not, that's weird, but I mean, the reality is I'm just not turning on those consoles all that often these days. It's PC, Steam Deck, Switch. That's the world I'm in, and I'm getting pretty used to not paying for online multiplayer on PC. Very used to it. I'm sure many people are going to be like, I've been used to that my entire life. That's the normal. That's what it should be. But there was a time where I couldn't imagine not having the online service, at least for one of the consoles. And I'm thinking about it. I'm like, do I have Xbox Game Pass at the moment? Even Ultimate? I don't know. I know I did a long-term deal, but I'm just not feeling compelled to go do that. And these are the services that kind of you need to make the system function as a whole, like to have online multiplayer, let alone the online or the game libraries that you get with these subscriptions. We're not talking about these tertiary subscription services like Ubisoft and EA Play. And yet EA is raising the price, which you got to imagine is going to squeeze more people out of that ecosystem and squeeze people out from wanting to make that purchase, that payment every month. So what do you think is happening here? Clearly, it's just like they're looking at the numbers and be like, we got some people that are going to keep subscribing to this. Let's just get as much money out of them. What's happening?
It's hard to tell. I can tell you right now, at least in the kind of communities I follow, because I do follow like the skateboarding video game community, just because I play a lot of skateboarding video games. One of the things that I have seen is that like there is a real kind of negative perception right now of even like Skate 4, the new skate game. It's not coming out the way people are wanting. It's not a game that like, oh, this is what I asked for. This is definitely what I wanted. It's actually kind of no. People are very like kind of concerned. At least the fan base.
Well, can you just give me some specifics on that? Because I'm not someone who's been into skate before. I was always a Tony Hawk guy. And when I hear skate is going for this like online hangout session where people can like build courses with one another while they're live in a game, that sounds pretty cool to me. But what's not hitting for the fandom?
I think it's more that the emphasis has become almost removed skateboarding entirely. They're like, you don't even need a skateboard. You can just run
the ones where you just kind of run off the side and doing like jackass stuff. Okay.
Yeah, or not even that. They're like, you can build an obstacle course and then you run through the obstacle course, and it's like, well, that's parkour.
That's Roblox. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's becoming kind of more like that.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, do cool tricks is kind of out. It's like really not that as interesting. And they're not doing a lot at the moment with like, oh, this is going to look better, or they're going to update something. It's like, oh no, this is the same thing. We just now ported all of this extra giant stuff on top of it. So it's all like, okay, the skateboarding is now getting almost like pushed to the side when really it's just like this giant monolith of like, okay, run around, obstacle course, parkour now. Like, parkour is a big thing. And it's like, wow, this is kind
in
of
chat got me with the more like walk for. It's just a dumb joke.
That's kind of the thing. And that's like in the trailers, it says, you don't even need to skate. And it's like, well, okay, then what are we doing?
I get why the fans would be worried about that. But we'll see. The game's still in the works. Long ways off, I think, still. So
yeah, because that's something that comes with EA Play, is that like, oh, you get access to the tests, like, the test stuff for that.
Right. So yeah, I mean, God, I'm really struggling to imagine a world in which I am so down bad that I'm subscribing to Xbox Game Pass, then PlayStation Plus, and then coming around and be like, okay, and now I need EA as well.
They're in Ubisoft, right? Ubisoft
right. I mean, Ubisoft is like not even really. Come on, those games they go down in price so fast, and I only want to play every third of them, every 3 of those, maybe.
I'm coming around to like, okay, I'm almost ready to play Far Cry again.
Sure, right, exactly, yes, and that takes a couple of Far Cries, which takes several years. Yeah. So you just wait for it to go down to $40, and then you own it, and you don't have to worry about all these headaches of being like looking at your bill every month and being like, oh my God, you play plus whatever the fuck they call it. Like, what am I doing with my life? Yeah. So I don't know. They can raise the price here. I imagine this is something of a statement of, we are no longer trying to attract new players in. That is not something that we're not attracting those people because they're not really out there anymore. Anyone who is willing to do something like this has already done so, and that therefore we need to just monetize them to the maximum amount. And I think that's what this is. That would be my guess.
Yeah, you don't do this unless you're settled.
Yep. Of course, EA, not the only company raising prices. In fact, the story says EA is far from alone in this. Sony, for example, raised the price from 4 annual subscriptions to PlayStation Plus back in September. In the wider world of entertainment, both Disney and Netflix, for example, have increased the prices of their subscription services within the past 6 months. And the latter is reportedly expected to do so again later this year. So
they're also cutting the sharing capabilities of Disney Plus and Hulu.
Right.
Also, did you hear about Yeah, they're going to make it so you can't share like Netflix. Did you hear that they also are making it so Game Pass, the amount you can put on ahead of time, right, is so you can only put, I think it was like 18 months or something ahead?
Well, for a while there, it was 36 months, right? It was a year. It was 3 years, I think. So
yes, and now they've cut it back, so you can't just keep stocking up.
Yep, I mean, these companies are looking for places where they can sort of, if not like directly raise prices, what they're doing there is they kind of are raising prices in the future, right? Because they're like, hey, by that point, it'll cost more, and we want people to have to pay that price at that point. So they're kind of just like damning the future for themselves, and all these companies are looking for opportunities to do that. Some of them don't have any other choice other than to be like, instead of paying what like the monthly fee or a yearly fee of £20, it's now £36 base. I mean, that's, you know, almost double. That's a huge amount in pounds. Jesus. So
yeah. And then I mean, at the same time, it's like, yeah, because people were stocking up, people were finding ways around it, and now it's just like, well, okay, we're stuck, and that's how it is. The future has turned on us.
Well, you know, let's talk about the future of indie games instead. Every game and announcement from the big AAA Initiative Showcase. This is from Eddie McHugh and Steve Watts at GameSpot. We are not going to actually read every single one of them. I'll start with a couple.
There's a lot of them.
There's a lot. I'll start with a couple at the top. Slay the Spire 2. The showcase kicked off on an exciting note with the announcement of Slay the Spire 2, a sequel fans had been calling for. The sequel arrives through Steam Early Access in 2025. I know a lot of Slay the Spire fans are out there. There was an update on Risk of Rain 2. It's getting its devotion update. I like Risk of Rain 2. I'm going to check back in on it.
There's a lot of content coming through that.
Yeah, right. They do a ton with that. Absolutely. But Alex, one of the reasons I was like happy to have you on the show, I know you pay attention to this stuff. I know you've like tried a lot of these games out before.
Yep.
Do you have some highlights from the show that you want to talk about?
The big ones for us, you've played Shadow of a Doubt, the like kind of sandbox detective game Voxels.
And I love it.
Voxels, that's going 1.0.
That real quick. So Shadows of Doubt. Shadows of Doubt is a procedurally generated murder mystery investigation game. I've talked about it before. It was in early access, and I adored it. It's like the kind of the perfect game that I always wanted in my life for a very long time now. It's like the game I'm like, this will be impossible. They can't actually do it. And this game is doing the things where it's like, yeah, we are going to just like systematically place evidence around the world, and you just have to go find it by talking to people and using a cool little detective tools and actually fingerprinting.
You get a little board with the string and everything, and you can connect it and figure out like these different murder mysteries.
And since it's like it's like programmatic, like that's actually exciting here because it's like it feels like anything can happen in this world, and they can kind of make it really these messy murder mysteries, and not something where it's like I have to be thinking the way the developer is thinking. I kind of have to just be thinking the way this world works, and there's something about that really gets me. So very excited this game is in 1.0 and coming to consoles.
Yeah. And then we get Gestalt Steam and Cinder. That one is that's a 2D kind of platforming Metroidvania, but it's really, really story intensive. There's a lot of like you get the big Metroidvania map, but the characters, you'll get quests and people will talk to you, say, hey, I need this thing. Can you go down in the sewers? And you go and kind of do that and come back. There's a main hub where you're talking to people, a lot of conversations and a lot of like leveling up systems, like very much the skill tree, the big massive skill tree. It's really well, animated and art. It looks fantastic. We've definitely demoed that one, and it's that one's very exciting.
Yeah, I thought this looked pretty good as well. It's got a strong style. Can I ask, what does the word gestalt mean? It's like greater than the sum of its parts or something like that. I see it in so many things. I'm like, I never understand how to use it as a word. Some of it's more than some of its part. Yeah, okay.
Exactly.
I don't think I'd ever feel comfortable using it in a sentence. So gestalt refers to the wholeness of something. Okay.
Yeah.
An organized whole that is perceived as more than the sum of its parts. Right. Again. Okay. That I get that, but again, I don't think I'd be comfortable using it in a sentence. All right. What else, Alex?
Kill Knight. That's a game that's kind of like I want to say like almost like a Diablo-esque kind of style game, but it looks fantastic. It's got a lot of like, I'm trying to think of how would we describe Kill Knight? I mean, it's very dark and gritty, very almost like I would almost say Dark Souls-y, but it's more stylistic than that.
I like how Eddie and Steve describe this as Kill Knight, in which you play as a knight who kills things. It's like, okay, cool. Hell yeah, let's go.
Yeah, and it's Diablo like angled down, and then very bullet helly, lots of projectiles on the screen to avoid. Very fast paced. Cool.
Yeah, it does look pretty neat. Jan seems to be a fan of it as well. Also, I got the titles going, Jan. If you guys want to update those now, sorry about that. Let's see. I saw you highlighted Darkest Dungeon. Is that like the original game again? What's happening with Darkest Dungeon?
Yeah, I believe this is the first game, and they're doing a free update called Darkest Kingdoms. So that ends up being more of like a kingdom management part of it, where you build up this town and you're protecting it, and then you're going into dungeons, and you still do the same combat. Darkest Dungeon 2 was so different in it, like they wanted to break away from the first game's format, so they end up being like you're on a train moving. So there's really no town aspect to it.
Huh.
Darkest Dungeon 1 had a home hub.
Okay,
So now,
sounds promising. I know people love Darkest Dungeon as well. I played a little bit of it. It was not really for me.
yeah, but there was like a home hub that you can upgrade different parts that would benefit your runs. Now it's going to actually be a town management sim mode. So it's a secondary mode added to it. So Darkest Kingdom.
Very cool. And then Hyperlight Breaker. Yeah, go ahead.
We finally got gameplay. This
Right.
is Heart Machine, who did Hyperlight Drifter, and they had done another game too. I'm trying to remember. I reviewed it, but they're trying to do it 3D now. So Hyperlight Drifter was like a top-down, like almost like a, original Zelda pixel art. Now we're going full 3D.
Full 3D.
And this looks real rad. A lot of neon lights. A lot of fast-paced combat. I'm trying to remember what their other game was, but their other game was very
Solar
similar.
Ash. Is that what?
Solar Ash?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
So the
that was
movement
like
and combat
space
looks a little like
skating game
Solar
or whatever.
Ash.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So this looks a little slicky, slidey as well, but not as much as Solar Ash.
Yeah, I've said this before. I always like it when a team, and this is what I liked about Risk of Rain too. I like it when an indie team like made a 2D game and then they make a sequel to it that's a 3D game. That's like such a cool, like I was alive when the Super Nintendo then became the N64 and all these things were going from 2D to 3D. I think it's cool that you as an indie dev are doing that same thing in 2024. That owns. I mean
that's like Risk of Rain 1 and 2, right?
Right. Yes. Exactly. That's exactly what I was saying. Yeah, I think that's the perfect example of that. That's such a cool thing, and I want more devs to do that. Two things that I picked out here. Chia is going to be coming to the Switch. I'm a huge fan of Chia. I think we made that like our hangout chill game, best game to smoke weed and drink to last year. It's fantastic, and I bet it's going to be great on the Switch. And then Streets of Rogue 2. Which is a procedurally generated, immersive, open world kind of beat 'em up kind of game with a lot of cool interactivity. And
Have you played it before?
I played a little bit of Streets of Rogue, yeah, but I put it off for so long. I'm excited to see a sequel. I'm like, maybe I'll just jump into that.
It's a cool, like, it reminds me of like the old GTA, the original
Right.
GTA. But you get each level, each character can be like they have really ridiculous classes, and then by doing the ridiculous classes, you get different abilities. You can get a comedian class where you press a button and all of a sudden you just see like little word bubbles pop up, and then your like enemies will either laugh or they'll get mad at you. And that's how you can go around. It's like, oh, do this quest or go break this guy out of jail, and you can kind of talk your way through it.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
But if you were like if you're like a big tanky guy, you can just break down the wall. So there's like these different ways.
So it's immersive and sandboxy, like where you could just play around with the different capabilities. And then again, my jam.
Yeah.
Mouse.
Mouse.
Yeah, is that the one you're talking about? Yeah, I think this one looks so cool. What do you have to say about it, Alex?
It's there were like, I want to say 3 or 4 public domain as soon as like Steamboat Willie kind of came out as like games. Oh, we got to do this. Most of them horror. This one's kind of coming out more of like a first person shooter. And I think it looks really cool. It's got a lot of good style artwork. It sounds a lot like Cuphead. It's got that like, the film grain and the musical style. So that one's very exciting.
Right, and I think this one doesn't even actually have like Steamboat Willie / Mickey Mouse in it. It's like a legally distinct mouse or whatever, but it has that style for sure. So, but at this point, they could put Steamboat Willie in it. I wouldn't be surprised if he shows up in the game because they are putting it out in a world where that is public domain now. It's a really cool style. This is where I'm at with shooters. I want to be playing shooters all the time. But I'm like very happy that the boomer shooter craze has taken over, because every single one of those, I'm like, I could just start playing these and I know I'm going to start having a good time right away. But I'm like also looking like, hey, we could do more with this as well. What else do you have? Mouse feels like that. Oh, we also have this, and that's exciting to me.
Oh, the one thing I didn't highlight, I wanted to point out was Never
Please.
Alone 2. The reason why I just wanted to bring this up is Never Alone was a Limbo style game, where you're just going, 2D, move to the right, but solve like little puzzles along the way. Never Alone 2 now is, like you said, it pops into the 3D now.
Right. Last one we have highlighted here takes us to our next story. The Rogue Prince of Persia will debut as an early access title next month. This is from Ben Lyons at Game Reactor. Ubisoft is having an absolute nightmare with leaks as of late. Not only did it manage to leak its own Star Wars Outlaws trailer, but recently a whole slew of rumors and reports have done the rounds claiming that the Dead Cell support studio, Evil Empire, is working on a roguelike Prince of Persia game. Those reports weren't wrong. The Rogue Prince of Persia, as the game is dubbed, will be a pure roguelike experience that sees players using the prince's traditional platforming and melee combat action to traverse and work their way through a vibrant and dangerous world. Unlike Prince of Persia, The Lost Crown, the Rogue Prince of Persia will be arriving in early access state to begin with, and only on PC for that matter. Evil Empire will only be dropping the game with a small amount of its ultimate content, with the intent of developing and improving the game with user feedback ahead of an inevitable 1.0 launch. Let's see. As for when early access arrival will happen, this is set for May 15th, 2024, meaning it's just over 1 month away.
Very exciting.
Very exciting. I listen, I adore Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. It's still like, I think it's my game of the year still. It's up there.
Okay.
It's definitely like in the top 3 without a doubt. Like there's no doubt at this moment it's in the top 3, but I think it's probably still my game of the year so far. I love it. I am also ecstatic that we're getting this as well. I love Dead Cells, spent so much time with Dead Cells even throughout early access, and then when it went 1.0 on Switch, I played so much I hurt my hand. I've talked about that story before. At like 80 hours in a week, and just was like my hands were exploding inside of their bones. And
I mean, you could like both Prince of Persias.
Exactly, and that's where I'm at. I'm like, I'm happy to have different flavors of Prince of Persia. This is fantastic. What did you think?
I'm very excited. I like Dead Cells quite a bit. The Castlevania DLC was a huge step. I find it funny that there was like a conversation once that Dead Cells was done releasing DLC. Like, oh, we're kind of done, and then people were kind of like I think one of the old developers who had left was like, that's stupid. Why would you stop doing DLC? And it's like, because they want to work on something else.
Yes,
and this looks. I mean, again, I want more. I want more of whatever they want to do. They've earned it. They've done enough goodwill. I could just go on and on about how much good DLC that they added. They did 2 indie guest character DLCs where you could play as Jacket from Hotline Miami and Hollow Knight in Dead Cells. Like, that's ridiculous. And they just kept doing it. They can do whatever they want, and they're doing a Prince of Persia. Fantastic.
Yeah, let's say
make him look like Jake Gyllenhaal.
Yeah, that's what they should do. Yes. So they put out this trailer, and it's an animated trailer that I think does a pretty good job of establishing this game's own voice, separate from the other Prince of Persia games. It feels not like this massive metropolis or these like tombs that you're going through. It's like a small town in the desert sort of thing, and it's, I don't know, it's got this like washed out deserty vibe to it. At least the animation does, and then the gameplay, they do have that later here, at least little snippets of it, where it's like and then it's just that sort of translated into the game. Now, Mike did play this. He played this in a preview last week, and he said like it's got a real strong like rotoscope vibe, where it makes it feel like a cinematic platformer similar to the original Prince of Persia. And the more I look at it, I'm like, I see that coming through. But in video, I'm not sure it like looks the best. I don't know if it's popping off. I know, Alex, you kind of had similar feelings about that.
Yeah, I feel like I like the design, but the way it kind of moves, it feels not real. It feels like this is like you said, like it looks like a video, and I mean maybe that's a positive like thing that I
once
don't
we're
understand.
Controlling it, maybe that just flies away, right?
Yeah, exactly, or even maybe it just becomes impressive, right?
Right, exactly.
Like, oh, this is impressive because it feels like I'm playing a cartoon. But as of right now, the way the video looks, I'm kind of not sure how I feel about that look, but again, Dead Cells. I'm seeing the Dead Cells in it, the slides, the double jumps, the different moves like bombs and whatnot. They have like a kind of the same like indicator visual style, and I'm very excited for that. So I like again. It doesn't feel like they're straying too far, but they're doing something new, and that's perfect for me. That's the perfect middle ground.
What game it reminds me of in the way it moves is Revenge of the Jedi for Nintendo DS. There's something about actually that and Attack of the Clones. I think that one was for Game Boy Advance. The sort of weird, I mean, actually it was maybe more Attack of the Clones. That game had some really weird rotoscoping going on in it. And I always enjoy that stuff actually when I'm playing it, and I think it's a really good fit for Prince of Persia. So the more I look at it, the more I'm like, yeah, this is cool. This is cool. And overall, the design of it, that is, I think they nailed that.
Yeah. And as somebody who, like, I played the original where it's like just the movement and the stop and the jump and everything like that. I like that we've evolved. I like that you could still go back and see the original, and then you could see the DNA of it, but know that they've moved so far in advance. I like that the DNA is still there.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And, people pointing out, like, going back to the Karateka vibes, which is, definitely the predecessor to the original Prince of Persia, where it's like a tiny character on the screen. And yeah, I think it also looks a lot like Dead Cells in a lot of ways, though, to be fair. Maybe actually the character in Dead Cells, much bigger than this, but it has similar sort of scale to me. When I
see like
the
movement kind of looks like that.
Without a doubt. That's definitely true. Okay. Steam Early Access, May 14th. Okay. Well, that's what it says on the video, and then they said May 15th. Oh, okay.
And we're going to have lots of power-ups that are going to consistently be added throughout.
Oh, yeah. And I just the look of being able to run on a wall in the background. I love that idea of like a 2D game where it's like when the wall's back there, you can run on that. And I can't wait to see how they add powers to mess with that and expand it. All right. Let's get to this next story. Immortals of... Actually, you know what? Let's take a quick break. Let's take a break. When we get back, we have Immortals of Aveuem studio news and a lot of other headlines we'll get to right after this. All right, we are back, and as promised, we're going to talk about Immortals of Aveuem. The studio has reportedly furloughed the majority of its staff. This is from Tom Ivan at VGC. Immortals of Aveuem developer Ascendant Studios has reportedly furloughed the majority of its staff. That's according to a LinkedIn post by former employee Chris Mornis, which has been corroborated by Polygon reporter Nicole Carpenter. Shoutouts to Nicole. Ascendant Studios has furloughed the majority of their staff, and Mornis, who left the studio last summer to join Phoenix Labs, I can't imagine what that would be like, as this is worse than getting laid off. Furlough is an imposed leave of absence from work, which is typically unpaid. While employees technically keep their jobs and are expected to return to work at some point, it means they don't qualify for things like severance pay. Carpenter said, "This lines up with what I've heard at Immortals of Aveuem developer Ascendant Studios, that a large portion of the staff was recently furloughed. Haven't been able to confirm numbers, and Ascendant hasn't responded to multiple requests for comment," she added. The studio's debut game, the EA-published Immortals of Aveuem, was released for PS5, Xbox Series X and S, and PC last August. The following month, Ascendant laid off nearly half of its staff, while its CEO Brett Robbins later said the move was down to poor sales during a crowded release window.
They've kind of said that they were, we got buried by other games, and I'm like, did you get buried by other games, or did you get buried by your own game?
Yeah, I mean, if they're doing a trick to not pay these people with the furlough, that's pretty dirty, and I hope that they are punished for doing so. If this is like a legit thing where it's like, hey, we are going to furlough you for a couple of weeks because we don't want to fire you, we want to bring you back.
Yeah,
I hope that's the case. We'll see. But if it's like a long-term furlough or something like that, that is pretty dirty. I hope that's not the case. And then you're right. When I think of Immortals of Aveuem, I'm like, we get to this point where we get out of that busy season, and I'm like looking at Immortals of Aveuem and being like, oh man, I don't have time for you right now. Come on. Yep. And then we get to this point, and I look, I'm like, there's just nothing appealing when I look at this game. I don't feel anything. And it's so hard to get over that hump these days when I have so many things where I look in every direction, something that's like sparking joy inside me. I'm like, oh, I can't wait to go spend more time with that. And it's like, why am I forcing myself? Because I feel guilty about this game not performing well, which I do. And I don't know why. It's not my responsibility. They don't care if I can't pay my bills. But over here, like, man, I wish that game would have performed better, because it seems like they put a lot of hard work into it. And I bet if I played it, I would find something that is fine, and maybe even something I enjoy in a lot of ways. But it's just hard to get over that hump, Alex. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. No, and again, I've asked someone who's been furloughed during COVID just to kind of get over that hump. I mean, I don't say that it's good, but I will say, like, I mean, you can file unemployment during furlough. That's like still a thing. Right. But I don't know if it's state by state probably. But in my case, I was able to. It sucks. It's a bad situation. It's not fun for anybody. The hope is unemployment, and then the hope is that it's just to stem the tide until more funding comes in, or they can get their next project, or they can start Like they make a plan that gets funded enough to start moving forward on the next big game. I mean, that's the thing with a lot of developers, right? Is to staff up when it's time to make the game, cut ties when the game's done. And this could be a tactic to avoid that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the hope, right? See, I mean,
right.
You think positively, and it's not always the case.
Right. See, my suspicion here is what it really is a tactic to avoid having to pay out severance payments. That's what it feels like. But that's just a guess and a cynical one, and I could be wrong. So that's I'll say allegedly in my brain. My brain is alleging that that's a possibility. Yeah. And I do not know. All right. Physical copies of Star Wars Outlaws require an internet connection to install. This is from Zach Swisen at Kotaku. Ubisoft and Massive's upcoming open-world Star Wars Outlaws will require players to be connected to the internet to install the game, even if they bought a physical copy of it. While that might not be a problem for most people in 2024, it raises concern about how playable the game will be in 10 or 20 years. And once again shows publishers aren't all that concerned with preserving video games. Star Wars Outlaws is looking pretty dang good, and a new story trailer released on April 9th. We learned Outlaws is launching in August. We also got a better look at some of the characters and worlds you'll be able to visit in this large Star Wars adventure that's set between the events of Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. This is there was like several fallouts from this game where it's like one was hey, there's this season pass and that's kind of annoying, and why are you selling that? Like you can get it as part of a $110 and $130 version of this game. That seems like a lot of money these days. What are you doing over there? And people had a lot to say about that. We talked about that on the show yesterday, and now it's about this, where people were seeing the physical version and seeing it had that internet connection required. Basically what's happening here is these games are getting too big for one Blu-ray disc. And these companies don't want to put a second disc in for as little as that costs. It's a couple pennies to probably make a Blu-ray disc these days. Maybe a little bit, maybe more than that, maybe 50 cents. That adds up. They want to save that money, and every little bit of money they save is a little bit of money that they've earned in their idea. And they have a solution. The solution is you put in this disc, and that confirms that you own the game, and then you download it, which we know that 95% of you have your thing connected to the internet. And if you are one of the people that don't have it connected to the internet, you're probably not buying a game like this anyhow. And yet all of the concerns here about, man, that's those things. There are going to be outliers. And then what does happen to a game like this down the line? And it's like, well, people will create a cracked version of the PC version and you'll be able to play that in the future. But it's like, well, yeah, but we want to also preserve the console versions. What happens to that? Alex, I'm of the opinion that you could do this as long as there is an escape hatch at the end where they can hit a button and it turns off all that stuff, and you could just sort of own the game in some way. But the problem is, it won't be on the disc. So what do they do here? I don't know.
I mean, I think at a certain point, if it's always to install is not necessarily too much of a problem. I mean, because you can. I recently borrowed someone's PS4 with PT on it. Mm-hmm. Like you could preserve it that way, and I know plenty of people who have. That person keeps it in a very locked trunk with a code on it and says this is preservation, and that's we have a lot of preservationists in Chicago. So, but they. It's something that you could do, and you kind of hold tight onto that kind of stuff in hopes that eventually there is a workaround, right? You could download these files and do this thing, a lot of people have been looking into Fuser recently, and I happened to look into it, and I found that there is a whole community that just preserved Fuser, and is still. And but the thing is, it was funnier because I was like, okay, Fuser, how to play Fuser in 2024, and just like a dozen YouTube videos are like, here you go. We preserved it. We have copies of it. We just want to make sure that everything is taken
every song you want, including the Seinfeld theme. Watch Fuser Fridays, everybody.
Yeah, but the whole idea though is that this should continue to exist, and I feel like with things like this, it makes it harder, but we could still work around that. And I don't want to say illegally. I want to say for preservationists, right? This is important, right?
Yeah, we're talking about there are the piracy is going to happen now, and it will be a problem for these companies one way or the other, whether this game had this download requirement or not. That's not going to fix that. So and instead, like when we talk about like the long-term need for the people in the piracy scene, it is about like, hey, in 15 years, when we look back at this, we know a company like Ubisoft is going to be looking forward and not thinking about this. And we have the evidence before our very eyes. It's the way they behave with all of their other games that have come and gone. And so in the moment, let's do what it takes, keep that stuff off to the side. And if that means like it makes it easier to pirate now, and people are like, oh yeah, that's going to be the version I'm going to preserve. These companies could have thought of that. I don't know. I think the answer probably here is just ship it on another disc, 2 discs. Let's just do that. I think if you could have a physical version
Final
with the game
Fantasy
on it,
VII Rebirth?
Yeah. Rebirth had
is on
what,
2
4
discs, right?
What was it, 2 discs? For some reason I'm like 4 discs. I don't know. I didn't see it, but yeah,
Same
it's at
as,
least
I
on
think
2
it was-
discs.
And I think it was Final Fantasy 15 might have been that way. I mean, it's just that's the way, right? It's just you just do the 2 discs, right? I remember buying Final Fantasy 7 with 3 discs and Final Fantasy 8 with 4 discs, right? One of them would always get scratched, and you can only play until that point of the game. But But at the same time, it's like I've also bought a physical copy of Doom 2016, or it was for PC. Someone's like, "We're selling Doom 2016 for PC on sale," and I was like, "I'll get that." And I open it up, and it's just a code. It's
Yep.
like, well,
Yeah,
okay.
I got the Microsoft sent the collector's edition of Starfield, and it's like the code, but it was like printed on one of their little credit disc things or whatever. I'm like, oh, that's cute, but man, this collector's edition just feels insubstantial when it doesn't have the actual physical game in there. I don't know.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I mean. Is that like this is not new. Unfortunately, it's Star Wars, so it's got bigger optics on it.
Yep.
And it's already kind of going back and forth with the public. People don't like how it looks. People don't like DLC plans. People don't, it's like this. Star Wars has always got a big magnifying glass on it.
Right.
So it sucks that it requires an internet connection to install. But I mean, it's.
Yeah, I'm with you.
It
is what it is.
It's been that way for so long, and it sucks. But
yep, at a certain point, it's like, man, it's a battle. I felt it's lost. I'm not going to keep fighting it personally.
Let's buy a new PS5. Let's install this game. Let's take this game offline.
Yeah, just put it in a locked box. There we go.
Yep, the PS5 in a lockbox. Done.
All right. Microsoft enters agreement to explore bringing new NetEase games to Xbox. This is from Tom Ivan at VGC. Microsoft Gaming and NetEase have entered into an agreement to explore bringing new NetEase games to Xbox consoles and other platforms. The agreement between the Xbox maker and the Chinese gaming giant was announced alongside the news that Blizzard's titles will be once again made available in China. Activision Blizzard, which had held licensing agreements with NetEase since 2008, pulled its games from the Chinese market last January. But following Microsoft's acquisition of Activision Blizzard last year, the companies have struck up a renewed publishing deal that will ensure Warcraft is back in the Chinese market along with all of Blizzard's other games. The deal covers games Chinese players previously had access to, including World of Warcraft, Hearthstone, and other titles in the Warcraft, Overwatch, Diablo, and StarCraft franchises. Returning Blizzard's legendary games to the players in China while exploring ways to bring more new titles to Xbox demonstrates our commitment to bringing more games to more players around the world, said Microsoft Gaming CEO Phil Spencer. Over the last few years, NetEase has established a significant number of game development studios in the West. These include Bullet Farm, which is headed by veteran Call of Duty Black Ops designer David Vonderhaar, and Worlds Untold, which is led by former Mass Effect lead writer Mac Walters. Is NetEase also the one that is like hiring people out of like Sega that were working on Yakuza and Like a Dragon? Or is that another publisher? I'm like trying to place that. I think it might be a different publisher.
I think that sounds right.
It could be. But either way, like we know NetEase has done similar stuff. Obviously, those were the 2 examples listed in the story. And yeah, I think that having a strong relationship with NetEase is going to make sense. I think we're going to see a lot more games coming out of China that feel like they are meant for a global audience. That seems to be the trend. And we know, if you look at the stories, we know why that's the trend, because China's become sort of this uncertain market for these publishers that even work in China, where they're like, hey, we are making games, and if we make them for the Chinese audience, we're going to make a ton of money. And then the Chinese regulators come through and they're like, well, right now we're pretty mad at video games, so we're not going to let you do that. And then it's like, wait, what? And then they see their stock ticker tick down because it's like, oh my God, you operate in China. That's where most of your business is. And the Chinese regulators are going to come after you. Now, the Chinese regulators fluctuate. They go back and forth on how hard they're going to come down on video gaming. But that does hang over the heads of these publishers. And so these publishers have begun looking around and saying, hey, let's find out what we can do for the global gaming audience so we can diversify. And I think what's going to happen is a lot of big games are going to start coming out of China that you're going to want. If you're Phil Spencer, you're going to want them on Xbox. So this deal makes a lot of sense. It feels like him getting out ahead of the curve.
I mean, but that's kind of been the goal for Xbox for a while, is to try to like hit markets that either aren't there. Like obviously the mobile gaming space, NetEase does a lot of mobile gaming games as well. But at this, what's a market that's not really being hit right now is like, okay, let's go into China. Let's build a base, right? I mean, people will talk about that problem with obviously the console races, that people already established those digital libraries on PlayStation. But where have people not started building those digital libraries? Yep.
And basically, Lex Letty in the chat says Nagoshi is a subsidiary of NetEase Games. So, and that was the person that left Ryoga Gotoku Studio, which was responsible for Like a Dragon and the rest of those frames.
Okay.
Rest of those games. Yeah. And so if that's them, that means they've done that a bunch of times now. It's not even just those three examples. There's like several that they've done that with. Yeah. All right, let's see. Your last story: previously purchased Smash Brothers 3DS DLC is no longer re-downloadable. This is from a Reddit user called tjob123, who says access to games DLC is managed on a per-game basis. So if you delete DLC, you have to go back through the game itself to re-download DLC. You can't do it in the eShop itself. I just tested this with Mighty Gunfolk's DLC to verify this. Smash does this a little differently. It makes you connect to its online servers before you connect to the eShop. And because Nintendo just shut down online services for the 3DS and Wii U tonight, you can't connect to Smash Online, effectively meaning that all DLC you previously purchased is no longer available. And this is only for the 3DS version, can't speak for the Wii U. Thanks to Nintendo for not carrying. Obviously, this is a Reddit post. And so, basically what happened here is they shut down the servers, so you can't connect to those servers for this game, and that is how the game verified you and then sent you into the eShop to re-download this stuff. And you should be able to re-download most of your purchases. That's something that Nintendo said, even as it was shutting down the eShop and shutting down online services. They're like, if you own a game, you'll still be able to re-download that for quite some time. But they never warned anyone. They never said, "Oh, except for Smash Brothers, that's gonna be an exception because of the way it works." They never warned anybody, and now here it is. It doesn't work. This person reached out to Nintendo service and customer service and said, "Hey, here's my problem. What's going on?" And the person's like, "You know what? We don't have an answer for you. We are going to send this up the chain of command and see if we can get an answer." And that's where it was left off. But that's a frustrating scenario. Because, there were other games that had something similar. Monster Hunter apparently also works this way, Alex. But Capcom was like, that's happening. And if you want to have that DLC, go get it now. Because it's going to happen. You're not going to be able to get it anymore. So Capcom was very public and upfront. Still not great. I still want the option to be able to re-download the stuff I've purchased, even if you're shutting down other things. But whatever, you gave me a warning. If I cared, I would have gone and done it before the warning came into effect. Nintendo did not do that with Smash Brothers, and that's why some people are feeling very frustrated and burned right now. God, do they fix this, or is this one of those things where like, oops, sorry, we're Nintendo, we're moving on to the Switch 2?
I think that they have to. They can't. Nintendo doesn't really burn a lot of. Does Nintendo burn a lot of goodwill? I'm not sure if
I would describe Nintendo as aloof. Unaware of its ability to produce or maintain goodwill. I think they do what Nintendo does, and a lot of people jive with that. And then Nintendo's like, oh, and what about this online service? And everyone's like, we hate that. And everyone's like, oh, good, you love it. Great. That's how I would describe Nintendo. So I don't know if this is going to register with them.
I mean, but there is a thing that comes to mind that, like, they have a long list, right? A long list of all of the games that, like, okay, when online goes offline, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? What are we going to do? Let's make a plan. And how many games does Nintendo publish that have kind of DLC like this? Like, I wonder. Yeah. And then I also wonder if you were to go down that list, if like you get 10, 20 games, 3 of them don't work, and they're like, I missed 2. Dang it. Okay. And so, there is like, that's how I feel like it would work, right? You go through the list, and if someone didn't go through the list, well, okay, you didn't go through the list with a fine-tooth comb, right?
Yep.
I think this is a bummer. This is a really big bummer. I think that there really needs to be ways to do this. There should be something in the back end, and I feel like it also shouldn't be too complicated to do so.
Right.
I mean, but I'm like somebody like, oh, just turn the switch and turn the servers on. That's not how it works, right? I guess.
Right. What you can do is it hacks.3ds.guide or something like that? Hack the hell out of your 3DS, install the H shop, and I believe all that stuff is there available on the H shop, which just works on your 3DS, and you just hit the button, and it will install that DLC for you. Hack the hell out of that thing. And also, hack the planet, of course.
That's what a lot of people did, though, that I know. Either people like bought a 3DS and hacked it, or just loaded up. I know I was one of the idiots that it's like the PSP or the Vita. They're like, oh, the Vita shop is shutting down. I was like, well, I guess I better spend $300 on all the games that I want to have on this thing. And the same with the 3DS. 3DS is shutting down. Well, I guess I better just go through a bunch of online lists of what are the top best games and spend $200 on these games so I can have this thing just loaded up forever. But yeah, this sucks though, for sure.
All right. You know what? We're done with the news. Let's get to the poll question. And while I get that set up, Alex, why don't you tell people where they can find you, what you have going on, and all of that good stuff?
I'm Alex Orona out of Chicago. We are me and my co-host, we're Super GG Radio. We're a podcast that plays early access, beta tests, demos, pre-release demos. We do 2-3 a week. Just discussing, some of these new like the very tiny indies. We're digging through all Steam early access so you don't have to. A lot of the games that kind of like we pride ourselves a little bit in getting those like, oh, we called that one. Oh, we played that one like 4 months ago. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, this is the big internet sensation. We're like, yeah, I called it, Yep. Just because we do comb through them, and we have a list always going on at a time of like 15 to 20, like 3 for this episode, and sometimes they'll be like, oh, here's 20, and we go through them. We're like, I don't love any of these, but we're going through them. We're combing through them. We're podcasting about it. We're part of NPR of Illinois, but we're just guys combing through all that stuff. We make YouTube videos and about like, okay, here's the demo. Here's what we thought about it. Podcasting, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, that's good work. I did have a thought about a show I want to do where it's I want to just throw out a word and search for it on Steam, see what comes up, and then have the audience vote on the games they can see on the screen for which one we should play. Obviously, not the ones we're not allowed to play on Twitch, you damn perverts, but have them vote, and then just go in there and play it. And because the chances are the games that are going to pop up are going to be the ones that are like 500 to 2 gigabytes or 500 megabytes to 2 gigabytes or something like that. So we'd be able to download it in a couple minutes and kill some time, like looking at it on the Steam page, talking about it while it's downloading, start playing it, and just see what happens, and just kind of Steam roulette. I think that could be a good time.
It is a good time, and especially if you're trying to find some real no-name stuff, you do end up hitting gold. The one news story I didn't think anyone talked about was the fact that the Bandai Namco released 3 free indie games.
Oh, really? I didn't see this. What was this?
Here, hold on, let me pull it up here, because that was something that happened a week ago. And one of the things that we do on our show is that we will just like we do a thing called freebies, where we just tell everyone, hey, these are new free games that are around that people haven't checked out. And so if you want some free video games, you should do that. And it's called Not a Lot, Durango Wonko, and Boomer Road are the 3 games that came out that are just 3 games. And one of them, Durango Wonko, you're just a dog going through a house and making a mess.
Oh,
it's
fun.
Like, okay, this is a pretty good, this is a pretty sweet free game, but all Bandai Namco.
Yeah,
just shadow cool. Dropped them.
That's
so
really
it's just
neat.
So we're always like trying to find stuff, find new stuff and small stuff, because that's where you get real weird. We get some really weird concepts that are like, what if you put chess and a shotgun? And it's like, oh, okay, that cool. Okay, tell me more.
Good. I was waiting for it in chat, and both Jamie H. Christmas Eve and Chaser said, you live on Boomer Road, right, Grubb? And Jamie said, Mike, that's where Mike lives, right? Boomer Road. Yep. Very funny, chat. You guys think you're so cute. All right. Poll question. Persona 6 is green. 47% said true. 7% said false. And 46% said, what the hell are you talking about? So that means true wins. It turns out the freaks outnumber us. And wait, Alex, aren't you a freak yourself?
I'm very much a freak on this.
Yeah.
I've been playing these games for a very long time, since I was in high school and college, and they kind of runs my family. My brother is also really big into these, so we've been playing them, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's green. We're like, oh, really? Tell me more. Yeah. Okay.
Oh shit, green.
I mean, you want to talk about how like Persona 1 and the two versions of Persona 2 are bastard children, and all of a sudden with the Persona anniversary, they're in the forefront where they're actually displaying the protagonists of the first games and the second two games. Oh man, like that's got to mean something. Why is it?
It does have to mean something. Not anything important, but it means something.
No, all right. None of that's important.
New poll question. Are you subscribed to EA Play? Yes, no, and what is that? You could vote on that. We'll get the poll results for tomorrow's show of Game Mess Mornings here on Giant Bomb. Speaking of Giant Bomb, we have a bunch of stuff happening today still. With Voicemail Dump Truck, we'll be streaming some Helldivers 2. There's an update. We're going to check in on that. We're also going to be doing a town hall in the Discord for premium subscribers. I think it's for premium subscribers. So if you want to get in on that, check that out. There's some details in the Discord. Feel free to go to discord.gg/giantbomb and check that out. Come hang out with us and ask a question if you want. And then tomorrow, Game Mess Mornings, we'll have that happening. And then UPF will happen, and we'll have a BCR. I'll look forward to all of that, everybody. All right. I think with all of that, Alex, thank you so much for spending today talking with me about video games. I really appreciate it.
Anytime, man.
And thank you all for watching. You're the best audience in gaming. Until next time, have a good one. Take care of yourself, and goodbye.
GG.